Yeah, yeah. And
And
am I
also,
already a co-host?
oh no, I didn't make you one set.
Okay.
Sorry. Um, also, Helena Echlin is coming from the UK.
Okay. She's a big time writer, but not novelist yet. So now I think she's going to be a big time novelist.
For sure.
Okay, record to the cloud. There we go.
Okay, we got it. It's going to
By
be
the
a
way,
busy day.
I had that last one. Oh, okay. That last one that I got also came in corrupted, but the other version of it was fine. So I don't know what's going on with that.
Really?
We'll see what happens with
I
the next one.
I also add. Which one was it?
The duo, Wilson and Andrews.
I edited that also for my Chris Storm books, and it was fine. And I never used the cloud, never.
That is weird.
So now that's weird.
So what you're doing a separate version of it?
I'm editing out everything saying Bookstorm. Like I'm not doing here's our future books. I'm not doing the closing. I'm
Oh,
just making it way shorter, way shorter.
okay. Hmm. Okay. All right, let's talk about that later because that might be a little confusing now. I'm worried about that.
Well, I'm not saying anything except for I'm putting it in two locations.
But I'm thinking you should go ahead and put it in two locations with the same thing, like
I
the
don't
entire
like the
interview.
that's the beauty that I don't like that whole closing. I think it goes on too long with our private questions, and I've
Mhm.
wanted to end it for a long time. I don't even think we need to list all these books because I listen to other book podcasts. So that's the only thing I'm cutting out, taking
Hmm.
out that long ending. Nothing else. I'm editing
Okay.
all the same in the middle, like, when the author gets off, shortening it. It's all the same. It's pretty quick. It doesn't really take me that long.
Well, no, I
And then,
understand that, but it changes the interview.
yeah, it
So
does
it's not
because
the
it's
same
Chris
interview.
Storm Books podcast. It's a different podcast, and I don't want that long ending. It's actually
Okay.
been good to have the freedom to do my own thing a little bit and lighten it up. And then I'm not going to take any more interviews till January. And then I'm going to go out and just see what I can do and just try to build that brand before
Okay.
October.
Okay. Well, let's not
But
talk
I'm
about that
keeping
right
it
now
the
because
same
we've
for
got
Bookstorm.
her coming up.
Bookstorm is you and it's staying the same. But for Chris Storm Books, I'm shortening that back ending. I don't like those questions at the end. I feel like the whole thing just drags.
Hmm.
And I
Well,
really have been wanting to shorten that.
well, we did shorten it pretty considerably. We don't really ask each other that many questions or anything. I don't ask any questions really.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I didn't add anything different at the end. I just cut it.
okay. All right. Let's talk about that because
Now, the only
that,
reason you would have a problem with that is if I added something different all my own.
no, it's not that. It's just that there's a little bit of confusion, I feel like, that is going to come about that.
Why?
So, because advertising down the road, if we're trying to make money off our site, which is part of our goal, those are all things that change now that the same content is available elsewhere.
Well, yeah, well, I'm not going to try to tap into making money from Chris Storm on the same thing that we're making money from Bookstorm.
Yeah, that's why we got to talk about it. Okay, here we go. Here she is.
Work.
Hello, welcome.
Hey.
Hi. We're not live yet, so we're not even
Okay,
live recording.
We're just going to
I'm
But
say
trying
hi
to
for.
figure out Chris. You're Chris.
I'm Chris Storm. Let me introduce ourselves real quick. I'm
Okay.
Chris Storm.
Yeah.
This is Kristen Civiletto, somewhere next to
hello.
me or below me, and we're thrilled to have you. You're coming from the UK right now, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We're happy to have you. And I'm. What time do you have there? About six,
Seven.
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 Thank you for joining us at 7. I know that's a late hour. We've had a lot of authors from the UK, even as far as Australia. We get a lot of offers, and we really appreciate you coming on. And we loved it. We absolutely loved it.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to
Fantastic.
see your faces because I listen to Bookstorm quite a bit, and it's a fantastic podcast, by the way.
Thank you.
And
Thank
you're
you.
not, I don't know if your faces quite match your voices, but they're not quite what I imagined.
Uh-huh.
I need
Isn't
to
that
take a
how
bit to adjust.
that's how it always is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And just a couple of things real quick. First of all, do you pronounce your name Helena or Helena?
Helena.
Helena.
Helena. Okay.
Just think of it, the accents on the first syllable.
Got it.
Helena.
And the last name is Echlin,
Echlin.
hard K.
Yeah. Okay.
Got it.
Perfect.
And when we thank you and say goodbye, just go ahead and log off. And if it takes you a second to find the button to log off, don't worry about that. We can edit those things out.
Okay.
If you have to sneeze or somebody interrupts you, pets, no worries. We can take care of all those things.
Sounds
All
good.
right, great.
Okay, great. Let's get started. We really loved it. We know this is your debut psychological thriller. Before you came on, we usually go over our questions. We were too busy talking about the book. We really loved it. I think it's going to be huge. So let's
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. We're very excited about who we have with us here today. Kristen and I got the advanced reader's copy for a book by Helena Echlin called Clever Little Thing. We absolutely loved it. I think I read the whole thing in one afternoon. And welcome, Helena. We're thrilled to have you with us today to talk about this book.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled that you love the book.
Before we get started, I want to tell our listeners a little bit about you. First, thank you to Helena for joining us from the UK today, which is a good ways across the Atlantic and well into the evening at her time. So we're thrilled that you took the time to meet with us. You lived in the United States for a good period of time, I see. You have written for The Guardian and The Times, and I love that you said this. The steadiest job you ever had was writing for an etiquette advice column. How interesting that must have been, about your own faux pas. And we all have some of those. I bet that was interesting. When you lived in Northern California, I see that you wrote for Stanford. You worked for Stanford for 8 years as a professor at Stanford.
I wasn't a professor, I was an instructor, but yeah, I taught fiction writing for 8 years.
And now you're with Oxford, still teaching fiction writing. It's very impressive. And no wonder we pick up this book, Clever Little Thing, and we love it right away because you have a true talent as a novelist. So thank you for switching to that. I also wanted to quote a few endorsements because you had some great endorsements for this book, many of which are friends of Bookstorm Podcast and have actually been on our show. We have Ashley Elston, who said the book was compelling and creepy. It taps into the heart of maternal fear. Oh, yes, it does, Ashley. We couldn't agree more. Ashley Audrin also says it's sharp and unflinching, a perfectly unnerving story. Very much so. We absolutely adored it. We can't wait to dive down deep into this little bit of a scary thriller. And we're happy to have Helena with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, we're here to talk about Clever Little Thing, as Chris mentioned. And I'd like to give our listeners just a little bit of what's going on in the background with your story. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers. That is a little tricky. This is a thriller, and it is a thriller. And I would love it if you wanted to add anything at the end. Now, in the story, we meet Charlotte, and she has a daughter named Stella. And Stella is very, very clever, very bright. She's a little bit of a handful. She's somewhat disruptive and antisocial. Now, she had a babysitter named Blanca, and Blanca mysteriously dies. After Blanca's death, we see some very significant changes in Stella's personality. And Charlotte's a little worried because suddenly her daughter is more docile. She's mirroring some of the traits that she used to see in Blanca. For example, maybe a little of her accent creeps in there. Stella was a vegetarian. Now she's craving meat, especially other foods from Armenia, where Blanca was from. And there's a couple other things that I won't give away that were just fascinating that Charlotte started to see in her daughter. This is causing alarm, of course. Now, Charlotte is also pregnant with her second child. It's exhausting. And at some point, she believes that Blanca's mother could maybe come on board and help her a little bit because the child seems to have really taken to Blanca's mother. So we see this period of both of the women starting to get to know and see Stella in a very different light. And again, that's where so much of the intrigue and the thrill is. So I'm not going to say too much about that. Now, at one point, we now start to see where something unfolds that can't be explained necessarily. Charlotte believes that she maybe is, confused. Is she maybe losing her mind? She's not even sure. But all of this comes to a very thrilling conclusion when her family starts to break up. And so I want to kind of leave it there and not give away any spoilers. But did you want to add anything? Because this is a haunting book on so many levels.
No, actually, I really enjoyed listening to you talk about it.
Perfect.
Excellent.
We don't want to give any spoilers, which is so hard to do. But I have to tell you, you tapped into something that as a parent myself is very heart soothing, but also heartbreaking. Charlotte believes she knows her daughter Stella better than anyone else in the world, and she probably does. She's raised her. They have a DNA connection. They have a parental child connection, maybe even spiritual. But I took a quote from the book that said, sometimes it takes a village. Parents sometimes need professional help, counseling, medical treatment for their children. And I had to ask you, as the author, can both of these theories be true? Can we know our child absolutely better than anyone else, but could we possibly still require a village in raising them? And if we require a village, why do we sometimes feel like parental failures if we can't solve all of our child's problems on our own?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Both of those things definitely are true. Like, of course, parents know their kids best, and nobody can raise a kid on their own. I think that the reason mums are expected to solve kids' problems. I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day, and we were talking about our roles in our families. And she said, I am the person, she's also a mum, and she said, I am the person in my family who makes everything okay. And I was like, yeah, that is what mums do. And I think women are socialized from childhood to be the ones who notice the problems and read other people's emotions and try and fix the problems. And so, of course, when you become a mother, you not all mums, not all dads, but generally speaking, I think mothers are much more likely to be the ones who take on that work of noticing what's going on with the kids, noticing if something is not right, and taking it upon themselves to try and fix it. Like if your kid is anxious, then you try to teach them some breathing exercises. Or if your kid is shy, the mum's the one who sets up the play dates and liaises with the other mums. And if you can't make everything okay for your kid, then I think I don't necessarily think dads blame themselves, but I think mums really blame themselves. And I think to some extent, society blames mums when things go wrong. Um, I just a bit of personal experience here. I have a neurodivergent son, and a few years ago, he's fine now, and he's not stellar. But a few years ago, when he was having a lot of challenges, I had all these people around me who were saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then some people, meaning well, but some people said, maybe the problem is you. The problem is that you're too anxious, and that's why he's acting this way. As if, my anxiety could be causing his neurodivergence. And I thought that was really interesting because nobody said to my husband, maybe you're causing his neurodivergence.
Oh, that is very interesting. I love when the character Pete, who for our listeners is the dad, said to Charlotte, you and Stella have such an intense relationship. That reminds me of what you're talking about right here. And I just felt like, yes, Pete, guess what they do? And that's okay. Relationships come in all shapes and sizes. And is it not characterized by the two people in the relationship, what type of relationship you have, what type of parent, what type of child? And maybe you're showing us that all different relationships are okay.
Right. And I think with becoming a mother, there's a lot of pressure to do it one particular way. And there's the idea that there's one right way to be a mother, to parent. And that happens almost like when you get pregnant. It's like you have to give birth this way, and you have to feed your baby this way, and you have to sleep train or not sleep train. There's one right way and one wrong way. And I feel like my journey as a parent has been towards trying to accept all different ways and hoping that other people will accept the way that I parent and trying to accept the way other people parent and not judge them.
Good advice.
We had talked a little bit about some of those personality changes that Charlotte was seeing in Stella. And I was really struck by how much Charlotte relied on her instincts. A little bit of a twist of that first question. She perceived changes in her daughter, even using her sense of smell, which I thought was very almost primal. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that those instincts overrode what she was being told by others, by professionals, and people she trusted?
Um, well, I think that that's her sort of battle in the novel to figure out whether she should trust her instincts or other people and learning, her journey in the novel is to try and learn to trust her instincts. I feel sort of torn about this because I feel like on one hand, mother instinct is a really primal, almost mystical thing. It's in the novel that the mother, I feel like when I put my hand on my kid's forehead, I always know if they have a temperature or not. And I never had that ability before I had children, but with my children, I always know. But on the other hand, I feel like mother instinct is partly a learned thing. It's part of what I was talking about. Like women are socialized to pay attention and to know what's going on and to manage people's emotions and observe in a way that men aren't. So, like mother instinct, we call it mother instinct, but it's partly something that's socialized into us.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking too, and I was reading your story about some of the things that prevent us from exercising that instinct and going with it in that direction. And so, it's interesting you said that because some of it might be even conditioning to not trust your instinct or,
Mm.
there's a number of things I think that prevent us from going in that direction. But that's one that was leaping out at me when I was reading your story.
When I became a mum, one of the things I really noticed was how much I like to notice other mums and
Mm.
sort of judge them a little bit. And I assumed that they were judging me as well. And I found myself saying things like, I don't like to judge, but. And it's almost part of the inspiration of the novel is this experience of noticing what other women are doing. And then like say here's an example. I was in a park in Berkeley, California, and I heard a mum telling another mum a tip about how to pack lunch for your kid. And the tip was when you pack raspberries in your kid's lunch, you cut a little square of paper towel and put it under the raspberries, and that absorbs the moisture. So the raspberries are then not moist. And I thought that was really funny. And I told my husband, like, what a crazy lady. Like, for God forbid our kid should have moist raspberries in her lunch late. And how is that kid ever going to cope with life if she can't handle moist raspberries? Um, but I just thought it was interesting that this preoccupied me so much because I think I was also my need to judge this woman was also came from my own sort of insecurity and wondering, should I be packing? Maybe my raspberries are too moist, or I'm not packing fruit right, or maybe I am kind of like that woman because I do cut fruit up for my kids, and maybe I am kind of a crazy helicopter mum like that lady. So mummy judging, this whole idea of mummy judging, I think it's really tied up with this idea that there's a voice in your head saying, are you doing it right? You're not doing it like her. Does that mean you're doing it wrong? And I think, yeah, I think mums judge each other and themselves.
Yeah. We get in our own way sometimes. Very interesting.
That falls right into my next question. So you tapped into something with Stella that is actually a pet peeve of mine. I have always been so frustrated when I see society try to take a child and fit them all into the same box. There was one scene where Stella is in a playground with other kids. She's being judged very harshly by the other parents because she's not behaving exactly like the other children. I feel it's almost toxic. And you brought up this neurodivergent child, which I think is something that I feel we're more learning and understanding and accepting. And let me go so far as saying celebrating today. So, children whose brains work differently from what we consider typical. It could include how they learn, communicate, perceive their environment. Why do you believe that we found that Charlotte, the mother, And Pete, the father, seemed to celebrate Stella's differences. Charlotte seemed to celebrate, but Pete didn't seem to celebrate the differences. It seemed that he wanted her to fit in that little typical mold.
Have you heard of that essay, Welcome to Holland by Sarah Kingsley? So that is an essay, I think it was actually written in the 80s, and that is an essay by a mum of a neurodivergent kid. And it's called Welcome to Holland because the idea of the essay is if you have a neurodivergent kid, it's like you're supposed to go on holiday to Italy and that's your normal kid, but you actually ended up in Holland. And if you keep thinking about Italy, you're not going to have a good holiday. But if focus on embracing Holland, you can have a great vacation. And I think there are some that essay is a little bit controversial now, but I like the idea of let's just play with the idea of Holland and Italy for a minute. Pete's like, I want to go to Italy. Like Stella, he still really wants Stella to be normal, quote unquote normal. And he's focused on that. And in a way, I don't blame him because I think it can sometimes be really hard to have a neurodivergent kid and really hard to accept that they aren't going to be like a regular kid. So Pete is like, there must be some way that I can make make Stella into Italy. Like maybe a doctor can fix her, or maybe it's her mother is too indulgent. And if I just try to introduce a little bit more discipline, we can still go to Italy. And I don't want to judge him too harshly for that because I think that is just a natural human impulse, especially if neurodivergence is causing problems. But Charlotte is like, we're in Holland. This is who Stella is. She doesn't accept it completely at the beginning of the book, which again, I think is understandable. But she wants to meet Stella where she is. And she's like, Stella's super smart. She wants to read all the time. Fine, I'll get her some weird books about the history of aviation that no normal 8-year-old would want to read, but I will get Stella these books. And Stella has sensory issues, as you know, and Charlotte's like, I'm just going to accommodate them. I'm not going to try to change her. And um, I mean, I wanted to show, I wanted to talk, I wanted to sort of examine different ways that parents respond to having a neurodivergent kid.
I love that you did that. And I also thank you because you showed the reader. So, first of all, for our listeners, Stella is brilliant. Her ability to comprehend was far above her age level. And Charlotte missed that in her when it started to evaporate. You showed us that maybe being very typical and normal is pretty boring. Maybe in our quest to fit in perfectly, we're missing unique talents and gifts that go overlooked and unaccounted for.
Oh yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I think school, you were suggesting it, school is really one size fits all. And there are limited resources and so on, but school is really designed for almost like for a child who doesn't exist, like for a child that's completely normal. And I think yeah, it does tend to flatten people out a little bit.
Mhm. It was great. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about Dr. Buford. Dr. Buford says to Charlotte, and this is a quote: "It can be frightening when an adult never loses their temper. A child, especially a sensitive one, always knows when there's anger and grief simmering beneath the surface." Now, many parents think they're doing their child a service, by never showing strong emotions or trying to be perfectly stable all the time. But this can be scary on some level, right? I wanted to know if you could address that. And I wonder why. Is it because the child thinks the parent could explode at some point?
I love that you asked this question, by the way. I think it's really interesting. Like my
Yeah.
experience as a parent of anger has been really interesting because I'm not an angry person and I also don't tend not to swear. But once I had kids, and especially once the pandemic hit, I would just scream at them and like all these words would come out of my mouth and I'd be like, what? I've never even said that before. Um, and the first couple of times this happened, I was like, this is terrible. I just screamed at my, beloved, darling angels, and I feel terrible. And I apologized to them and explained why I had screamed at them. And then, it happened a few more times because the pandemic and so on. And every parent loses their temper. But over time, I think it was actually really good that I've done that, because the kids know that it's okay to lose your temper, that everyone loses their temper. It's not losing your temper that's a problem. It's like what you do afterwards. Are you going to apologize and explain what happened and talk it through and reassure them, or not? And I really think that when people don't lose their temper ever, that is very scary, because there are negative emotions below the surface. And I think kids are super good at reading their parents, especially if they're very close. They're super good at knowing what is going on. And if you're really angry and you don't show it in any way, but the kid still knows it's there, that is scary. And then the kid may end up growing into one of those, one of those people who has a relationship where, like they might turn into one of these couples who are like, we never fight, and that's weird, and that's not, I want my kids to learn how to be angry and learn how to get over it.
Yeah, I love what you said too, because there was a lot of conflict in your story, and teaching children how to navigate that conflict and resolve it instead of just stuffing it down. You're right. We have to allow it out and show them how we navigate.
I just want to add that over the years, as my kids have got used to me losing my temper, they've become completely inured to it. But it's almost like turned into a really good thing, because I don't do it very often. Pandemic's over, things are way better, but occasionally I do. They sort of, I'm like screaming, and they just stand there and look at me, wait till I'm finished, and then they say, "Mummy, you seem very tired. How about you sit on the sofa and we do the tidying up?"
I love it. If I swear, my kids know I'm very serious. So that's like a signal to them. So that's something I think we've all experienced as
Mm,
mothers, no doubt.
certainly have, yeah.
Well, we have loved talking to you about your fantastic book. It's enjoyable. We talked about a lot of heavy subjects, but it's a thriller and it entertains. And there's just so much here to unpack. And in fact, if we could give away spoilers, we'd have a lot more to unpack, but we're not going to
Mm.
do that, of course. I want to tell our listeners very quickly how to get in touch with you. You've got a website at helenaechlin.com. You're on Twitter, or X, I should say. And do you want to share anything about what's coming down the pipe? What's next for you?
I just want to add, I'm actually not really on Twitter these days. I'm on
Oh,
Instagram, so just Helena Echlin on Instagram, and I'd love to hear from readers or whoever. And I am working on a new novel, and it's a feminist thriller, a bit like Clever Little Thing. Mum is the main character, and I'm not quite ready to say any more than that, because I'm one of those writers who's a bit superstitious about revealing things before they're ready.
Ooh.
that's okay. That's enough of a teaser, and I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. We are just grateful you came on the show. And again, we loved talking about this fantastic book. So all the best to you with it.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Us
Cannot
Bye.
too.
wait. Can't wait for the next book. Sounds fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Kristen, I just know this next book is going to be phenomenal because I love the whole thing she said. Feminism, okay, women empowerment, anything having to do with this and the struggles of women and motherhood and whatever relationships, we love it.
Yes.
There was nothing that I didn't like about this book. It brought out of a lot of emotions. And, I also sensed, and you tapped into a little, an innate, selfless drive of a parent to protect their child.
Yeah.
And you could call it instinct, DNA, the relationship between a parent and a child. I mean, this almost goes so far as even when your kid is wrong, you're going to stick up for them and try to find a way out. It could cross over into a little dangerous situation. But I like that she brought out all these different aspects of parenting, the good and the bad.
Oh, yeah. And with high tension and with excellent writing. I agree with you. All right. Well, I'm going to tell our listeners about some other fantastic authors we have coming up. We have Victor Mythos, The Silent Watcher, Alex Hay, The Queen of Fives, Fiona Davis, The Stolen Queen, Carter Wilson, Tell Me What You Did, Jill Shelvis, Better Than Friends, Mark Greaney, Midnight Black, Andrews and Wilson, Defense Protocol. Marshall Karp, Don't Tell Me How to Die. Brett Battles with Golden Hour, the Stuart Woods series. Tess Gerritsen, The Summer Guest. Robert Kreis, The Big Empty. Brian Freeman, writing for the Robert Ludlum series, The Born Vendetta. Robert Dugoni with Hold Strong. And we are so excited. We cannot wait to talk to those authors. Listeners, we ask that you stay on the radar with us. You can find us at all different places on social media and YouTube. Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok. And those YouTube videos are fantastic because you can see some of these wonderful authors that we talk to all the time. Till next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.